That's easy in some circumstances. I think people have been coexisting with wildlife for centuries, particularly in the pastoralist context. And then you have to think about the benefits to those people who do live with wildlife and how that's distributed, how they're created. And I think Prince was quite correct about moving to the positive, negative. But then we have huge challenges with things where, wildlife and agriculture, intensive agriculture, for instance, is very difficult to share the same space. So then we get into the situation of spatial planning and letting science lead us. And as Kip so eloquently put, we need to think about wildlife corridors of movement and connectivity. And I think that's part of the problem is we've had haphazard development, haphazard planning, linear development along roads and things like that have cut corridors and have put people into wildlife space and vice versa. And I think those are some of the challenges that we need to think about. So the formation of conservation or conservancies in Kenya has been a fantastic achievement. Kenya leads the world in community conservation, where people can actually learn to coexist with wildlife and benefit from that wildlife. And I think these are some of the important things to get involved in.
Nice. And we are talking about the World Wildlife Day. Then one would want to ask, just how are the conflicts unique to the different countries that perhaps we would speak to? I know we are, narrowing down to Kenya, but we also understand that perhaps this is a global concern, and therefore there is need for synchrony across, if at all we're going to address the menace that we have acknowledged has been there since time immemorial. So what are some of the unique factors to these different countries, and how do we attain some element of synchrony if we're going to win the fight across?
I think that's a great question. So I think what we're beginning to understand more and more is that if we continue to degrade our planet, continue to put ourselves in a negative equity position by destroying biodiversity, global warming is apparent today. It's an existential threat to us as a species. And I think it's so important to bring it front and center to the table that actually protecting biodiversity, enhancing biodiversity, making sure we plan correctly around development and so forth becomes not just something that's a benefit to the wealthy West or the benefit to people who can afford to see this wildlife, but it's actually an existential threat that if we destroy it, then we destroy ourselves. And I think this is something that is important to get built up in awareness. And it's very difficult when you are unsure about where your next meal is coming from. Do you need to worry about an elephant or so forth? So it's very challenging, and I think the investment in around awareness is critically important, and then being able to draw the line between where the benefit is and where the cost is, and how you analyze the two together.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, we'll be coming back to you for that. I'm sure the gentlemen have heard you. But even as we perhaps speak to what it is that Tom says, it is important for us to acknowledge, and I know we have highlighted some of the concerns that would bring this conflict, of course, human population growth that cannot be denied, and of course encroachment into wildlife space, so the habitats, climate change. We have also had unsustainable land practices, or land use and practices across, and these are things that we might want to limit, but then again, the pressures of life would not allow for us to limit. It is important then that there's that sensitization, there's that understanding that, the locals or perhaps the people who are enjoying these spaces or these habitats for animals are made to understand. So what are some of the concerns, the consequences to this problems, or perhaps to human-wildlife conflict, that these people need to understand so that they come up with mechanisms that would help address the problems?
Thank you for the question. And I bet my colleagues will contribute to this, but how I look at it is we need to know that people lived with wildlife since time immemorial.
Okay.
And they've got a culture. And it's wrong for me to go and tell people, that you need to change your lifestyle and live this way. And before I go there, I think the challenge is, let's look at the pastoralist communities. They never had those small plot land ownership with fences and limits, and you shouldn't cross here and you shouldn't go that way. They had their own mechanism of controlling the pasture. It was enough for them for their livelihood, that is livestock, as well as wildlife.